The content of this podcast is based on medical fact and evidence-based practice from credible, authoritative sources, but is not a substitute for your institution's policies, procedures, common sense, or good judgment. The views and opinions are those of Eric Bauer and Flight Bridge Ed in their entirety.
Welcome to a very special episode of the Fast Archives. Today, we honor the 17 innocent lives lost in the tragic Parkland school shooting and reflect on what we can do to prevent events like this from happening in the future. This talk was given by Peter Antevy, who is a renowned expert in pre-hospital pediatrics and the innovator behind the Antevy Pediatric Resuscitation System. He serves as the EMS Medical Director for several fire rescue departments and is also an Associate Medical Director for Flight Bridge Ed. He was the EMS Medical Director who served on scene the day of the shooting. In this talk, simply titled Parkland, Peter offers a solemn reflection on his experiences during the Parkland tragedy, sharing insights into what went on and what could have been improved. He also shines a light on the incredible work of Max Schachter, the father of one of the victims, Alex Schachter, who has dedicated himself to doing all he can to prevent tragedies like this from ever happening again. Before we proceed, a word of caution. This podcast contains first-hand accounts of events at the Parkland school shooting, which may be disturbing for some listeners. If you feel uncomfortable with these accounts or you have young children around, we advise that you stop listening now. By releasing this talk as a podcast, we hope to contribute to the conversation on preventing future tragedies like this one. As responders, whether police, fire, EMS, or rescue, you play a critical role in preventing and ending these devastating events. We've included resources in the show notes that were either directly mentioned by Peter in his talk or provided by those involved, and we'll update them as new materials become available. We enter this episode with reverence, dedicating it to the 17 lives lost and families affected by the Parkland school shooting on February 14th, 2018.
Really happy to be here today. When Eric called me, I thought he was going to ask me to talk about ketamine or whole blood or why we should be giving bicarbonate calcium in cardiac arrest. Just kidding, Will. He's like, hey, Pete. I'm like, yeah. He's like, how about we talk about Parkland? I'm like, oh, God, really? So he says, but let's talk about what's happened since Parkland and the 5 years later. What have we learned? And so this is, the reason this is a difficult topic for me, I've been in this field for over 20 years, and just like you all, I've seen a lot of dead kids, adults. I've seen it all, like you have, and it never really bothered me, right? We never really brought it home. I never really talk about it with anybody who's not in the field, and then Parkland happened. So my wife was the first graduating class from Parkland. My mother-in-law lives literally like very close by, like maybe half a mile away. And then it turns out that several of the kids who passed away, I know them. And I've kept in touch with several of the people, which is hard because as a parent, when you lose a child, and if you've been through that, my God, we would never know what that feels like. But one of the kids who died, his name is Alex Schachter, and his father and I went to elementary school together. So this is really a story about Max and Alex, because in preparation for this talk, I actually called Max and I said, we got to meet. So he came to my office and we spent hours, and the emotion that's coming out of that man is so raw, so raw. And we can see that what's happened this week alone, it turns out that probably the politicians aren't going to figure it out. But what's happened and what you see in the story today is that a single man, a single father is just on a mission to make stuff happen. Now, what you should know about Max too is that when Alex was 3, Max's wife died. Alex's mom died of sudden cardiac arrest. I mean, this guy has had just, very, very heavy life. And when I met up with him the other day, I was a little nervous, because, you never really know, like, where is his head today? And obviously, and we talked about like the words people use and all those types of things. But the story that I want to tell today really goes into why it's important to learn what we've learned from Parkland, all the mistakes that were made, because I'm sure that those mistakes are happening still today in all of our communities. And so what I hope you take away from this talk today is to go back and to look at what Max has done on a national level and to see, are you doing it in your own community, at your school, at your police department, at your organization? Are you, at the city commission level? There's so much to do that this one person has accomplished, and that's really the message that I want to give today. So I always want to say that I've given Parkland talks before. We went around the country and we try to help a lot of people. It's very emotional. We always want to say that we dedicate these talks to the 17 lives that were lost that day. Well, let's start with Alex. So, and again, these are like, I have got some personal, Max says, take everything I got, because he says, I want people to see what I've lived through. Alex was in the band. Alex was a poet. He was an incredible kid. This is, a tribute to him to show you that I'm sure people in this audience have kids this age, 14 years old. I know I have a 14-year-old. When we were going through the slides in my office, Max couldn't even watch that slide. Here's Max. Max was a regular guy, had a regular job. He had, this new family. He got remarried. And then one day, on February 14th, 2018, everything changed. And, he has horror stories from that day. Just one example. He was told to go to the hotel, right, in Parkland, to wait until they tell him what's going on. He gets there at 5 o'clock. Guess what time they told him that his son is dead? 2 o'clock in the morning. And he said that about every hour on the hour, they would say, can you please send us more photos of your child? And he said, basically, all the parents are there huddled together, and he's sending another photo and sending another photo. And he got notified at 2 o'clock. It was horrible. The reunification was a horror show, right? So when this is happening in a place like Uvalde, Allen, and the one that happened in Tennessee, who are the experts that are going to come in and help out? So what Max did, he spent every minute in that courtroom. He spent every minute. There was a huge report that was done. He was on the commission that wrote the report, and he deconstructed every single part and every single mistake. And then he said, I'm going to be on a mission to make sure this doesn't happen ever again. So, this is more than, this is not political anymore. This is figuring out what we can do that's happening at all of your schools. And I'll show you a dashboard that Max has created that'll show your school and your county. He has a few states now that are on board, and how many events are happening at each school of what type. I mean, he's on a mission. And by the way, most states brush it under the rug. If there's any bullying and all that kind of stuff, they don't tell anybody. They brush it under the rug. He's going to change that. So let's talk about the murderer, okay? Let's call him that. He was exposed to violence since he was 3 years old. And forget about the fact that his mother was a drug addict, and she ended up giving him up for adoption. And he's living with an adoptive family. But while he was at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, MSD, he had 55 disciplines. 55 disciplines. By the way, in the school, on their dashboard, they said 0 problems for the 3 years prior to Parkland. That there was not one problem at the entire Parkland school. They were not reporting anything. 43 times he was visited by Broward Sheriff's Office. And then his mother, the adopted mother, says, son, let's go buy you a gun. And she allows the purchase of his first gun in 2016. So there's a lot of red flags that are happening here. A lot of red flags. And then he declares himself. So in September of 2017, he actually goes on YouTube and he writes this: I'm going to be a professional school shooter. So one of the mother's girlfriends must be connected on YouTube, whatever, and she sees the comment. And she says, holy cow, my girlfriend's son he's another Columbine waiting to happen. So what does she do? She actually reports this. And she basically says, this is what this guy is doing, right? It's very, very clear what she says. She gives them all the information to this deputy. And what does the deputy put? What does he say? He says he denied getting specific Instagram addresses, and he told investigators he did not have an Instagram account and is not familiar with social media, and asked later on, he said, I could have done more. So this was fail number one. But Mary didn't stop. Mary said, wait a minute, you're just going to drop this? So she said, you know what, I'm going to call the FBI. And she calls the FBI, and she says the same exact thing. She notifies about every YouTube, every Instagram post, and essentially on January 5th, 2018, think about that. This happened a month before. She calls the FBI and she gave the exact same information, but the person who picked up that tip never even notified the Miami field office. The Parkland sheriff, BSO, was never notified, and MSD was never notified. That today has been fixed because of Max Schachter. So isn't it interesting that here we are in Vegas. You know who knows we're in Vegas? Facebook knows we're here. TikTok knows we're here. You just have to be here and they know exactly where you are. You probably say, hey, I want to go on a cruise, and 10 seconds later, they're going to show you some cruise stuff on your phone. However, when he goes on the computer and starts typing all this stuff, and I'm going to show you what he was typing in on Google. We have this whole Google record. Guess who knows what you're typing into Google? Nobody. I said to Max, you telling me that if you go into a web browser and you type in all this stuff? He says, no, on social media now, they have ways of figuring that out, but not on the web browser. There was a lot of people that knew this guy was trouble. They actually had, they actually called him the crazy kid. They all knew and they all thought that this guy was going to do bad things. And the staff was notified multiple times. He had 19 episodes where he had a knife, a bullet, or a firearm seen in his possession. So you could see that there were so many people along the way who could have prevented this tragedy, but there's no one actually looking at it. Is there anyone at your school today, okay, who, if someone says something on social media, that the school can do a threat assessment? And the answer is, there was never anyone who did that. Now, because of Max and the laws that he's passed in the state of Florida, every school has a threat assessment team, and every threat has to be assessed by those threat assessors. That's just one of the small items. It may seem minuscule, but none of this happened at Parkland because Parkland is very affluent, right? The average home value there is like $800,000. It's all gated communities. It's one of the top, back then, the number 7 most desired place to live in this country. So these warning signs were not noticed, and let's take a look what he was writing in on the web browser. The very top, you could see search for Charlottesville shooting. He searched for the Polytech, that's the Virginia Tech massacre. Search for Columbine High School massacre, Virginia Tech massacre. Search for 5.56 ammo. For sale, 1,000 rounds. He searched for how many rounds were fired during the Las Vegas massacre. Search for AR-15 mags, Aurora shooting victims. The shooting victims list. Aurora shooting, how many rounds? He's trying to figure out exactly what he needs to take with him. But it gets worse. He searched for killing people, searched for Stoneman Douglas, searched for Smith & Wesson. And look at the dates. It's all it's getting close. January 13th. This is just a few days after this FBI agent was notified. Imagine that they would have had access into what he was doing, or they would have just gone to his house. They could have stopped this. Search for Stoneman Douglas school map. Remember, this kid was a former student. He had since graduated, and now this is a year past. So he knows all about the school. He knows the security guards. He knows everybody by name. He still looked up the map. He still searched for school shooting, MSD. He searched for soft guitar case because that's what he wanted to purchase to bring the guns in, the long guns in. Searched for school shooters. And this is the big one here. He searched for how long does it take for a cop to show up at a school shooting. And when you hear that this kid went through police reports, he dug and he dug and he dug. And guess what? He told himself how much time he had because he was timing everything. He had this internal clock in his head. How long do you think he thought he had? Where he knew that the cops would never even be in the building. Who wants to throw out a number? 30? Close. 20. So he said 20 minutes, then I'm going to come in the building. So this kid knew what was going on. So I hate to see his face and so forth, but I'm going to show you a quick video of him. But you'll hear him talking, and he says, yeah, it's exactly what I did.
Do you remember if you ever kind of searched out on the internet ways to do a school shooting? Yes.
I did my own research.
Yeah, tell me what research you did.
I looked up on Wikipedia. I studied mass murderers and how they did it.
Uh-huh.
Like their plans and what they got and what they used.
And what did you learn from that kind of study?
I learned that the Columbine shooters, they had 3 guns that they used. They used High Point 9995, regular. They used a double barrel shotgun cut down pistol grip. They used another shotgun, and they used the Tech 9. I learned that from there. I learned Virginia Tech shooter. He had a tactical vest, and he had 2 pistols, Glock 9s, I think. I can't remember. I don't remember what brand, but he went to the gun range and he sighted them in.
Look at all the posts that he put on social media. When I turn 21, I'm going to kill people. This is all stuff that they had access to. In 2020, you'll hear me on the news doing this. On the night of my massacre, you are not forgotten. Elliot, may you rest in peace. It makes me happy to see people die. These are all things that were visible that he was putting out there that nobody paid attention to. These are the things that if you're watching this today, you need to understand that we have to fix. This is one of the big problems we have to fix. And again, you can just go through and see that he goes through and he just keeps writing these things, and these are all things that should have been tipping us off. The last time I gave a talk here, I went through the entire the shooting. I'm not doing that today. But what I am going to show you is just a couple of things, because this also goes to what had to be fixed since Parkland. And it should be fixed in your neck of the woods, in your kid's school. So that's the 1200 building that's circled. And the road at the very top of the screen is called Holmberg. And the road at the right side of your screen, that's called Pine Island. So he was dropped off right, if you see that circle where it says East Stairwell, if you go right to the right, there's a gate. You can see a little walkway there. That gate was open. It's a walk-through gate. One of those gates where you can't take your bicycle through, but you could walk right through. And he says that when he says on the video, I don't think I had this video here, but he says when he walked through, he saw the security guard see him. And he said, oh shit, this is not good for me. But that security guard ended up running the other way to go get a sheriff, an SRO, school resource officer, who's part of Broward Sheriff. And that guy ended up hiding for 52 minutes behind the pole. He is actually, the jury is being selected for his trial at the end of the month. Max calls him the coward of Broward. And unfortunately, he knew, this murderer knew that this guy had a gun. And he thought he was coming after him. But the guy never ended up coming in the building at all. The timeline is important because everything was over very, very quickly. You could see he got there at 2:19. He began the shooting at 2:21. Even though that security guard saw him with a gun, he knew that it was a gun. It was a very long bag, and he knew Cruz. He knew the kid. He still never called a code red. By 2:25, 34 people have been shot, including Alex. So this is all done within 4 minutes. And then he's gone because at the end of the day, I'll show you in a minute, he was already up on the 3rd floor. And what he was trying to do now is do kind of like a Las Vegas style where he was up on the 3rd floor and he was trying to kill all the fire and EMS and police who were coming in. Thankfully, there were hurricane-proof windows. And then we're going to talk about the law enforcement piece in a minute, which I know many of you know about, but we're going to talk about that as well and what we can do on the EMS side to actually make sure this never happens again. So this is 1217. It's a 1st floor classroom. And, you know, what I never knew, right, is that there's the door. When you look at, if you're coming in that door and you make a right, that area is kind of cubbied in because if, God forbid, there's a shooter, it's supposed to be, it's called a hard corner. You're supposed to go and hide everyone in that hard corner so that the shooter can't see anything. But look what they did. They put desks and they put furniture. And so they couldn't, those kids could not pack in there. So what they were doing, they were hiding behind like some TV, some screens, and so on and so forth. And all he did was he came to the door, and you can see that he tried to shoot the door, but then what he did was he just shot that glass, and then he went in, and whatever he could see, and whoever he could see, that's who he shot. He never went in one room. But the hard corners were a problem, and the teachers were never taught that. They were never told anything about hard corners, put the kids here, none of that. And the kids who were trying to hide behind things, like imagine trying to hide behind something, he saw them, he just shot right through it and killed them, right? Because they didn't know what to do. This is one of the teachers, and she happens to be a Holocaust teacher, and you'll hear her say, we had never had a drill to tell us what to do.
And they tried to find cover wherever they could. We didn't have much time, but they scrambled to different parts of the room, sort of along the perimeter, and some tried to get behind the laptop cart, and some tried to get behind a file cabinet and the Recordex board. Hannah and Shannon went under the well of the teacher desk. So I stood there for a second while they all tried to get cover. We had never had a drill or anything to tell us what to do or where to go.
Hopefully that's not true today. I think you know, I asked my son the other day, I said, how many drills do you have? He said they do drills like every 3 months now at this school, at my kid's school. 2nd floor. So he kills a bunch of kids on the 1st floor. The 2nd floor folks figured out that something was going on. They all went and they hid, and the teachers were smart enough to take cardboard paper and they taped it to the window. He was going through, he didn't hear a sound. He was saying something to the effect of, come on out and play. He was shooting up into the ceiling. And he walks through this hallway and doesn't see or hear anything, and he just continues on. So not one child on the 2nd floor was murdered. Not one. So then he goes to the end of this hallway. Here's where luck will have it. All the kids from the 3rd floor know there's something going on. And so now they're all in a panic of what to do. So they all decide to mass exit. Where do they start exiting from? The hallway on this side of the building. So he goes down this hallway and he goes up the stairwell, starts shooting people, and all the kids were running. Imagine that they would have been running down that stairwell. What a massacre it would have been. Because you want to see the photo of how many kids were on the 3rd floor on the other side of that building, really trying to just like run like hell to get out of that building. I mean, I can't even tell you what a nightmare it would have been if all those kids, and you know, you have the images of what happened at that H&M in Allen the other day, how sad that is. We got lucky here. One can say that we got lucky to an extent. So now he's on the 3rd floor. All the people who could have gone were gone, had left the building. And this is the teacher's lounge. So He actually, I was just told this by Max the other day, he takes his AR-15 right up to the window to try and get that bullet through, and apparently fragments did come through, because we found fragments, and because those fragments ended up going pretty far, we then got reports that there's another shooter on the football field. So you can only imagine now what's going on. We're hearing 1200 building, that officer who hid behind the pole, he says 300 building, which was way on the other side. So he was giving misinformation, or she was giving wrong information. And then we were told there's another shooter. And so now this kid says, okay, I'm done, I'm leaving. And what does he do? He goes to Subway. So if you want to see the mind of what this kid does, he walked about a half a mile down the road to the Subway, and then he walks into a McDonald's, and he sees a student who had run out. He sees a student who's the brother of a girl that he just shot. And he asked him for a ride home. And the kid had enough sense to say, no. Coral Springs is a big city, bigger city, let's say. There's a Coral Springs Fire Department and Police Department. Parkland is kind of that, like a bedroom community, affluent bedroom community stuck onto Coral Springs. When their city commission came through, they're like, you know what? We'll take the fire department from Coral Springs. So that's where the Coral Springs Parkland Fire Department. But for police, we'll take the sheriff's office. So this whole thing caused a big problem, because when people were calling dispatch, in Coral Springs, we have our own dispatch. So when you call 911, it was going to the Broward dispatch. Coral Springs police officers sitting in the building, literally a mile and a half down the road. We have no idea what's going on. No idea. So finally, someone tipped us off that there's a problem. And would you believe that the first person in that building was a guy who has a desk job? It's a good friend of mine, because Scotty and my wife went to school together in Stoneman Douglas many years ago. So Scotty's got a desk job, and he hears what's going on. He gets into his car. He shoots over there. He goes through all the other people who are out there. He has his long gun in his trunk. He took out his handgun, but he knew that if this was a handgun versus a long gun, he's dead. He went in anyway. You'll hear a little later on the difference in training between Coral Springs police and fire versus the BSO, and hopefully all of you by now have heard the story enough that you have to train and do better than what we sometimes have seen on the news. When they came to the door, that stairwell on the 1200 building, they looked at each other and they said, basically, that's it, we're going to die. They thought they were going to die. Why? Because someone had gone to the school video and rewound it by 20 minutes, or did rewound it all the way. So when they were at that door, they were told, he's on the first floor. Now, there was other police officers coming from the other stairwell. The whole floor is filled with smoke. The fire alarm's going off because of all the rounds this kid shot off. Could you only imagine? They were told that he's on the first floor. You had guys entering the building from both sides, couldn't see a thing. Scotty told me, he's like, I don't even know why or how we didn't shoot our own person. It was a complete cluster. Then the other part I'm going to talk about a little later on is who actually did the medical work in the building. It wasn't one EMS person. All the tourniquets and all the chest seals, everything that was done was put on by police. And fortunately, we had trained for years on doing those things until we convinced them that you're the ones to help people. Not one of those tourniquets or chest seals were put on by anyone except our police department, Coral Springs Police Department. Inside the building, zero communication. Why? Because everybody and their mother was on the same channel. Everybody's on the radio. Everybody's on the radio. So there was zero communication. You'll hear, this is inside the building. Take a listen.
We got no comms. Zero comms. Tony, zero comms. I'm going to call the officer and just tell him to send guys. You want to key up on this radio? This. The documents were incorrect on the log side of the table.
So now they're in there. They have no idea where this kid is or what's happening. There was no communication. And now, who has incident command? You have BSO set up in one place. We, Coral Springs, set up in a completely different place, and nobody was talking to each other. So much so that we had a SWAT medic from another city self-deploy, show up. He just walks into the building. He sees a girl on the ground that had already been tagged, black tagged. He says he feels a pulse. So he gets the girl up. He runs out to the golf cart outside. And here I am. I'm waiting out there to see if anyone else is coming out. He brings out this girl. So I ended up leaving the scene with this girl to go to the hospital and, ended up doing 2 finger thoracostomies in the back of the ambulance. But he's self-deployed. So now I'm off the scene. She happened to be the last person to come out of the scene, so that was okay. And another medical director, a colleague of mine, I transferred it over to him. But that also didn't go so well. And unfortunately, she was appropriately black tagged. But now I'm 20 miles away at a trauma center instead of being on the scene. And that's where we ended up setting up shop. And again, that fortunately was not in a direct line of sight of where the 3rd floor, where the 1200 is. If you that left corner where the white circle is, that's where the teacher's lounge is. And there were lots of people trying to come into that side of the building. He was just trying to pick everybody off. So thankfully, we were there and we had blocked with some engines. When I arrived onto the scene, I'm clueless. I was probably dressed like this, but without a jacket. It turns out that where the shooter was leaving, I was running. Because I had to park a little further away. I ran in, and I'm a sitting duck too. I would have been a sitting duck. I came in right on that road right there. Clueless. And he was waiting for us. Thank God for the hurricane-proof windows. We got out people as quickly as we can. All of them that came out, like I said, already had tourniquets and chest seals on. And there you could see here that when they brought me that girl, and I'm sitting in the back of an ambulance, so similar to that one that's sitting, this is not the one, but I was sitting right there in that corner. The ambulance wasn't moving, and I'm in there, 0 pulse, there's nothing. Now I got the CNN helicopters overhead, and my EMS chief opens the door, and he says, "Are you staying or are you going?" And I had to make a decision at that point in time that I wasn't going to take a dead body out right there. And we had like a little tent there. I wasn't going to do that. I just said, we're going to go. And it was a good decision I did that. In retrospect, very tough decision to make, to leave the scene of an MCI when you're the medical director. So the first patient was transported at 2158. And then that was me with Gina at 5844. But again, all the patients were transported. There was no tarps. There was no tags. I'll talk about that in a minute. It was basically 2, go, 3, go. We just piled people on, and my EMS chief gets a lot of credit. 17 lives were saved, and some of them were trying to die en route to the hospital. Fortunately, we got them there, and we spared those lives. I'm very proud of my guys for doing that, my guys and gals. So just to kind of recap here, who's really the first responder? Well, are there bleeding kits now in your kids' schools? Raise a hand if there are, okay? Well, hopefully there are, but are they in the hallway or are they in the room itself, right? So I'm fortunate now that we made a big push. There's more tourniquets at my kids' school than I think students. I mean, that's how crazy it's gotten. When I was on 60 Minutes back in November, the thing that made the headlines is that I told the interviewer that my kids have bleeding kits in their backpacks. How screwed up is that? And he said to me, are you telling me that the future is that all of us are going to be carrying bleeding kits? And look where we are today, right? It's very, very sad state of affairs. The dispatchers need to be trained on stop the bleed. The police officers are third in line. And then the RTF, which we had practiced so hard on RTF, we were not permitted to enter because they didn't know where he was because they rewound the video and they didn't realize he was gone. So I'm fuming outside, not allowed to go in. And it turns out that none of us went in. All the kids were brought out to us by PD. So if you think that this is all going to happen and you're going to get there and they're going to be tarps and all that, none of that happens. None of it. So we got to scratch all that away. We got to stop doing that, right? It doesn't make any sense. So let's talk about what has been accomplished. And again, this is something that's the sweat and tears, a lot of tears by Max and many of the other parents, to be quite honest, who have really fought for this. So this is the sheriff from another county who led the commission. And I wanted to put this video clip in because I wanted you to hear that how important training is. So what have we learned? You have to have training, regular training with PD and with EMS.
Make sure your people are well equipped and well trained. When you look at active shooter or active assailant training, there's a big difference, a huge difference between the Broward County Sheriff's Office and the Coral Springs Police Department. They were the two major responding agencies. Coral Springs acted phenomenally. Every year, every officer goes through 12 hours of drill-based training. In the Broward County Sheriff's Office, they went through 4 hours about once every 3 years, and they probably got one repetition of drills. So, those are some big differences. Those are glaring. So I think those are the types of things that law enforcement agencies need to look at and make sure that you're where you need to be.
So it's so important. So if you want to talk to me afterwards, I'm sure you guys are doing a lot of this stuff, but it takes the EMS chief, the medical director. You got to keep pushing. The cops don't want to train with us. Now, when you come to one of my trainings, the cops look like medics and the medics look like cops because they recognize that there's no boundary anymore between us, even for cardiac arrest and many other things. Here's another lesson learned. The folks at BSO were not wearing their vests. So take a look at this video. And when this video came out, it was mind-blowing that they were actually putting on their vests. They had to go, they opened the trunk, they go find the vest. I mean, this is not permitted anymore. This has to be very, very exact, and you cannot waste not even a second to go and do any of these things.
Watch your height. They said something about a 3-story building.
Now, I told you that Scotty's gun was in the back of his car. I'll show you what he's developed since then so that he doesn't have to go to his trunk anymore to get his long gun. Florida, after Parkland, has spent a lot of money to the tune of over $1.1 billion to do all the things that we're talking about here and to make sure that schools now are fortified. And it's funny, I say the word fortified, but these schools are made of concrete. It's like one big concrete slab. And when they have a fire alarm, and Max said to me, he's like, can you believe you got a fire alarm in a building that will never go on fire, and it's never gone on fire, and it's a huge campus, and they take everybody and they stream them right outside, right so they can get picked off. He's like, what are we thinking? So now we don't do that anymore. The fire alarm, there's a 30-second pause, and if there's no fire, you're not moving. And even if the fire is somewhere else, you probably shouldn't leave this building when it's in 10 buildings over. These are subtle things that we really have to understand and start to teach. Now, these slides are very wordy, and I kind of did this on purpose, only because there's so much that has been accomplished. And again, I'm not going to read everything, but that bullet point right in the middle is interesting. All 4,000 public schools now in the state of Florida have at least one armed school safety officer on campus at all times. The next bullet point, the Panic app, that was created by another father, Elon Al-Hadef, who's a doctor at the hospital that I work at. And he says, I don't understand. If there's something goes wrong in the class, if you go to a bank and you try to rob a bank, they just push the button. In the school, how come we don't have a button? So now he's gone. The state of Florida has the law. I believe he's passed it in New Jersey. So these are other subtle things that now are being done by people to say we need to protect our schools even more. The mandatory active assailant response policies for law enforcement, you would think that would have been common practice, but it wasn't. Mandatory active shooter drills in every single school. The reunification plan is a huge thing. Very, very difficult to do if you've never done it before. The crisis training, school guardians. We're going to talk about the school guardian program in a minute. But here's that bullet point. Every school is required to notify parents when there is a threat to your child's school. Before, they just wouldn't tell you. And a mental health coordinator. And we continue. Safer corners. We talked about that and how those have to be kept open now. All classroom doors are locked. All open gates must be staffed. The covering of the classroom door window, it has to be opaque so the guy can't see through it. Law enforcement now has to have access to the school cameras. I mean, these are minor things that all add up to safety. That vulnerability assessment is something that was created by the Secret Service. So Max has worked with the Secret Service because they do vulnerability assessments all the time when they protect the president. They're experts at that. And now there's a whole manual now on how to perform a vulnerability assessment. And every school has a team that does that. The Guardian program. So now, this is Aaron Feiss. He's the coach. He went he knew that there was a shooting going on. He had no gun. He went running in to get the guy. And he was shot. That's a hero. Okay? So, in honor of him, they've established a Guardian program and they've named the law after that so that if you work at a school, they do the whole FBI background checks. It's really, really difficult to become a guardian. They put you through, I think it's a 3 or 4 day course, and you could be carrying. Every teacher now has to have this type of training, active shooter training, before they graduate. So that's another thing that's happened in the state of Florida. So what Max has done, he's created a school safety dashboard. I'm going to kind of go through real quick, but there's a lot of these types of things where you can look at every school in every county and you can see what's going on in it's very transparent now. He created this, and it's under the Safe Schools for Alex, which is a website that I'll take you to. Max has testified in front of Congress. Max has worked with the Trump administration. Max has worked with the Biden administration. He don't care. He don't care. It's not red or blue for him, right? This is the day that they passed the law that he wrote. And he was in the Rose Garden there at the White House. So this man's been on a mission. And this man's done just some incredible work. Okay, I'm gonna run through. Who's using RAMP? Anyone using RAMP? You guys still using Start and Jump Start? Okay, let's have a bonfire. And let's throw that, let's burn all of that up, because you'll never, ever, ever use it for an MCI active shooter type of thing. I won't go into it right now. Who's doing whole blood in the field? Okay, when I come here in a couple of years, I want to see every single hand raised. This is the best thing that's happened in trauma care in the last century. So if you're not doing it today, I really, really hope that you do it tomorrow. I really thought this was really cool, where the folks at Pulsera are now telling the state, hey, you use these bands so that the reunification happens, and these are being used on every single patient every single day so that an MCI is not a big deal. I think this is a brilliant, brilliant move. So kudos to the Pulsera team. MCI Mondays, we talked about that. So every Monday at my agency for about 3 or 4 months, the cops and Fire EMS, we go to an abandoned church and we practice for 3-4 hours. Scotty Myers, first one in, he created a lock called the Scott lock, that now he can keep his long gun in the car so he doesn't have to go to the trunk anymore. So even he's done something special there as well. So just to finish, Alex was an incredible kid. Max is an incredible human being. And what I wanted to do is just show you a poem that Alex wrote before he passed. Obviously, he's just an incredible kind of kid. And then the students from Parkland end up they put music behind it and they sang it. When you look at the words that go behind the screen, reflect on your own life. Where are you in life as far as, are you seeking help? Do you have people around you that can support you? we're here for you if you ever need that help, right? I always say people should call me, text me, email me all the time because we do need each other. The work that you guys do, I'm in awe of. As a medical director, we have the easy work. All of you, each of you, have a very, very difficult job. So please get the help that you need. And I thank you guys very much. Let's take a listen to this last piece.
Life is like a roller coaster. It has some ups and some downs. Sometimes you can take it slow or very fast. It may be hard to breathe sometimes, but you just have to push yourself and keep going. Your bar is your safety. It's like your family and friends. You hold on tight and don't let go. But sometimes you might throw your hands up, because your friends and family will always be with you. Just like that bar, keeping you safe at all times. It may